Hello and welcome to Studying for the LEED Green Associate Exam, Tips from Real Life LEED. My name is Tristan Roberts and I'll be moderating today's webinar. This webinar is sponsored by LEED User. LEED User is a website that gives credit-by-credit advice on earning LEED certification for your projects. Membership is available starting at $9.95 per month, $99.95 per year, or $349.95 per year for project teams of up to 10 people. Also, while much of our premium content on LEED User is available only to our members, our forum is available to anyone at no charge. So I encourage you all to join and visit our site often. Now we'll get started with the webinar. Again, my name is Tristan Roberts and I'll be hosting. I'm happy to be joined today by Joel McKellar. Joel McKellar is a LEED AP, a BD&C specialty. Joel is the author behind Real Life LEED, the popular blog that covers hands-on issues related to LEED certification, accreditation, and USGBC policy issues. Joel is a research associate with LS3P Associates. And without further ado, I'm going to hand it over to Joel. Thank you.
Hello. I hope everyone is well. My name is Joel McKellar, and I wanted to I'm excited to go over the LEED Green Associate exam with you today. First off, to start off with, I want to thank LEED User for inviting me. Hold on one second. We're getting feedback.
Joel, I'm going to take a moment and jump in while you're doing that and just say we're going to have a question and answer session at the end of Joel's presentation. So if you have questions that come up during the presentation, just feel free to please enter them into the Q&A window on your screen, and we'll hold them all for the end and then get to as many as we can at that time. Back to you, Joel.
Okay. Do we have the feedback issues taken care of now? My audio is off on my end before we start. Okay. Now that everything sounds good, without further ado, let's go ahead and jump into this. As he mentioned earlier, my name is Joel McKellar. I'm with Real Life LEED. I founded that about 3 years ago, and my full-time job is with LS3P Associates, a regional architecture firm headed in Charleston, South Carolina. A little bit about myself. I won't dwell too much on this. First off, LS3P Associates, we have been done a ton of LEED work lately. We've been keeping track of how much we've been doing, and we just crossed 1 million square feet of LEED certified space just yesterday on Monday. We've had about 40% of our firm revenue comes from LEED registered or certified projects. So we're doing quite a lot of work. My position at the firm is a research associate. I do a lot of work looking at how do we make schools that children can learn better or have higher test scores. How do we design hospitals where patients heal faster? And I very quickly learned that we had there was so much information going on in sustainable design. So within 6 months, I earned my LEED accreditation with the firm about 4 years ago. And I'm seeing we're getting a lot of sound issues. Let me try to move to, instead of this headset, into my just regular phone. And let's see if that works. I'm sorry, guys. 1 second. Okay, is that better? All right, great. So now hopefully these audio difficulties are out of the way and we'll move forward. As I mentioned, I've been a LEED coordinator on a number of projects, and I've taught a lot of LEED AP training classes under the old exams for USGBC Low Country and in-house and at LS3P. And so I've now we've switched over to the old system, or to the new system. I've moved into LEED GA training courses. I haven't yet done specialty exams, although I imagine that'll be very similar to the LEED AP former exam setups or study setups. So I've had one class go through. I'll be teaching another webinar in the next couple months for our local USGBC chapter, and we'll be updating all of my, what I've learned on my blog, Real Life LEED, and elsewhere. So I have a fair amount of experience, although I will say I have not personally taken the LEED GA exam, so just be aware of that. But I've had a number of people who have taken it give me feedback, so everything you're going to hear is going to be informed by that. So real quick, kind of obligation to kind of point this out. LEED 2009, for those of you that aren't aware, is an update and a harmonization of a number of previous LEED systems. So LEED for new construction, LEED for commercial interiors, LEED EB, LEED Core and Shell, and LEED for schools are all in this now new aligned format. LEED for neighborhood development is going to be launched actually this Thursday and will be folded into that system with the LEED AP specialty for ND exam going live on June 11th. And LEED for homes is outside the scope of these revisions, although they have launched a LEED for home specialty exam as well. And if you're unsure what I'm talking about with these specialties, we'll cover that in just a second. With the new system, it used to just be there as one test. You were a LEED, AP, or you weren't. Now they've split that into multiple tiers. So we have a 3-tier system. There's the Tier 1 Green Associate, there's the Tier 2 LEED AP with specialty, and there's the Tier 3 LEED AP Fellow. The LEED AP Fellow tier there's no way to do that yet. They haven't figured out exactly what that's going to be. It'll be similar to like an AIA Fellow is my understanding, or what you'll see, very distinguished, kind of probably a peer review process. I'd be surprised if it was a test to become a LEED AP Fellow. The LEED AP Specialty is equivalent, the Tier 2 is equivalent to what the former LEED AP was. Just now they're putting more emphasis on the specialty you take that exam in. And the Tier 1 Green Associate is kind of a lesser level, kind of almost halfway level that is really what we're going to be focusing on today. Again, I'm going to cover this kind of introductory information, giving everyone updated about the exams, and then we'll cover kind of recommendations for Green Associate content, study guides and stuff like that in the second half of this. So the Green Associate exam is really about covering the general materials for LEED. So, what is the USGBC? What is the GBCI? What is LEED in general? And then what are some basic principles of sustainable design without getting specifically into, okay, like what you would in the LEED AP specialty exam for building design and construction, what is the reference standard for this credit, SSC4 or whatever. So it's an introductory credential that's designed that I think is a great move, by the way, because it allows people that might be in marketing or the higher levels in firms that aren't necessarily going to be working on the day-to-day LEED projects but need to understand the implications of contracts and things like that. Attorneys, all these people that need to know and understand LEED but don't necessarily need that very specific project knowledge if you're actually completing a LEED project. And of course, it is a tiered system, so you need to pass that level in order to get to the next level, even if you are one of those project managers or technical people. So those are the 3 tiers. And just so you know, the old exams, you could take 3 exams. One track was for new construction, one track was for commercial interiors, and one track was for existing buildings. Those exam tracks essentially exist in the new system, but they're a little different. For instance, there's, building design and construction is roughly equivalent to LEED for new construction, but building design and construction also contains information on LEED for core and shell and LEED for schools. Since LEED NC, LEED CS, and LEED for schools are so similar, they kind of group those together. So you now have one track that kind of covers all 3 of those systems, and even the reference guides now are also combined. So if you buy the B, D, and C reference guide, you're getting a reference guide that contains LEED NC, LEED CS, and LEED schools instead of having to buy 3 separate guides. Ditto for LEED commercial interiors. That's now commercial interiors design and construction. When they're released, the LEED CI retail program will be folded into that as well, even though that's not live at this point. LEED for existing buildings is now the operations and maintenance specialty exam track, and they are launching 2 new tracks. LEED for homes exam track has already been launched. LEED for neighborhood design track or neighborhood development track the beta testing has been completed. Just last week I found out there are now LEED AP ND specialists out there, those that took the beta test and passed, but for everyone else, you can start taking that exam on June 11th. So that's coming up soon as well. There's also, it used to be anyone could take all the tests. Or any test they wanted. You didn't have to have any experience. There were no prerequisites. You just literally signed up and went and took it. That's changed with the new system. They're trying to make the credentials more stringent and more meaningful. Some people don't like this. Some do. I'm kind of on the fence a little bit. I definitely like that they split it up. But I think, basically, I don't think they should have put restrictions on the LEED GA, and there are some restrictions in the LEED GA, but as you'll see, pretty much anyone can still take this exam. They say you must be employed or in schools with a green building component or document involvement in support of a LEED project, not document experience on a LEED project. Important distinction, because as we'll see in a second, the Tier 2 exam requires some form of experience on a LEED project. So the employment is pretty simple. You know, if you work for someone that's somehow related to the design and construction industry and sustainable design, you're going to qualify. So architecture firms, engineering firms, contracting firms, specialty realty firms, just about anything you could probably make an argument that you are involved in sustainable design and construction anyway. I mean, even if you're an attorney and you're working on sustainable design litigation, you know, I would still say that would qualify. But there is a review process that you need to be aware of, and you have to submit an application for it. There's also a possibility of if you go through classwork related to sustainable design. So for instance, my understanding is that if you take a LEED GA training class, that is enough to get you eligibility, to give you eligibility to take the LEED GA exam. So you can definitely get into the LEED GA level without too much effort. You can find a way to do it, I assure you. That is not the case with the new LEED AP specialty, or it was called LEED AP Plus. You'll hear this different thing. When they first announced this, they had different terminology that kind of switched around. So LEED AP Plus, LEED AP with specialty, those are interchangeable. It seems to be they've kind of dropped the LEED AP Plus term, and now they're preferring LEED AP with specialty. This is a good point to bring out. I am not in any way an official of the USGBC or GBCI. I work on this stuff all the time, and I've done a lot of research to figure out what's working both for our firm and for real-life LEED readers. So I'm pretty confident in everything I'm saying, but I'm not 100% certain on certain things. And I just want to make that little statement right there. Anyway, to get to the LEED AP specialty, you have to document work on a LEED project within the last 2 to 3 years, with verification either through LEED Online or employer attestation. Most people are doing this through, you know, a letter from an employer, and I'll show you an example of that. Before, we created just a stock letter in our firm that says, hey, you know, you have worked on this project, and we could fill in the details for those people that have worked on the projects. But the key thing is here, you cannot get this level without working on a LEED project in some shape or fashion. So they become much more restrictive on Tier 2, although most people can still take Tier 1. And of course, you know, Tier 3, we don't really know, you know, what it's going to take at this point. I imagine there'll be some sort of peer review process, so I'm not going to dwell on that. So going back to the documentation for eligibility for a LEED Green Associate training, you know, as I said before, you have to have engagement in an education program that addresses green building principles. That is wide open for interpretation. And my understanding is that a LEED GA training class will qualify. It doesn't have to be, you know, a college level, you know, full-time, you know, accredited university credit. It can be kind of weekly class, continuing education, that sort of thing can qualify. Employment is pretty obvious. What you'll see on the right side of the screen is just a little stock letter we created in-house just to show that someone's been involved. They want to see something on a letterhead of the company you work for to make it look a little more official and be clear you didn't just type something up. So, you know, if you are on the opposite side as I am, where you're trying to guide people on what to do, I would probably go ahead and put something like this together to make your life easier as time goes through. And there's a couple other things you're agreeing to if you become a LEED Green Associate or LEED AP that weren't required under the old system. For one thing, you have to agree to a code of ethics and a disciplinary policy. This is pretty standard when you read it compared to what you'll see in other organizations. Like, for instance, if you just join the AIA, you're agreeing to something very similar here. The kind of higher end stuff that you need to be aware of. There's, interestingly, numerous restrictions for felons, even if what you've done wasn't related to design and construction. I'd really be surprised if they're suspending or revoking anything unless there is some serious breach of conduct or something going on. There's no rules for not being green enough in your design or construction. You know, for instance, you can't get revoked for designing a Walmart in the middle of, you know, a rural area or something like that. So there are, you know, I wouldn't dwell on this too much. You know, it's pretty standard boilerplate, but you are agreeing to it, and you need to be aware of it. Different from that, though, is LEED credentialing maintenance. This is new for the new specialty systems. Um, the former LEED AP designation did not require any continuing education, and you are not required to upgrade into the new specialty system. You have a 2-year window if you're a current LEED AP where you can upgrade to the LEED AP with specialty system, but you don't have to do it. And you can be a LEED AP for the rest of your life, just the normal old version 2 LEED AP, and never have to do any of this. I have jumped into the new system. As I mentioned before, I want to be able to explain it to my readers and the people I work with. I did that in January. I submitted about 15 credit hours worth of continuing maintenance hours, and they have not yet approved or denied them yet. I got in touch with some people over at the GBCI, and they said they haven't yet coded that system yet, so no ones have been approved or denied that have been submitted. They will start doing that sometime in the next few months, and it'll be completely self-submittal. So you go online, you submit your hours. There's a lot of different ways you can get them. If you volunteer for sustainable organizations, you can get hours. If you do a presentation like I'm giving right now, I can get credit for both the hour I'm spending presenting as well as a couple hours for putting together the materials. You sitting through this sort of presentation, you could potentially get hours. And there's a distinction between non-education review body programs and education review body programs through approval. So, you can submit pretty much any presentation, but a certain number of them are going to have to come from an official USGBC reviewed process. And the availability of that right now isn't terribly good, but it's getting better every day. They can be expensive right now, but again, there's becoming more. I noticed McGraw-Hill and their publications have just recently started offering free LEED-approved credit hours. So there's a lot more to this. I'm not going to dwell on it because it's not really about, this is what you have to deal with after you take the exam. LEED User actually did a couple webinars on this. There's a great one that was done by Mara Baum from HOK. It's freely available on the LEED User website. If you want to learn more about it, I strongly suggest checking that out, and you can learn a lot that way. They cover it in great detail, but that's all I'm going to talk about this for right now. Obviously, there are costs associated with taking this exam. It used to just be you paid for the test and that was it. Now, as I mentioned, there are application requirements, so there's an application fee. It's $50 for everyone for the LEED GA exam. The exam fee itself ranges from $150 to $200 depending on whether or not you are a USGBC national member, company, employee, or not. And then you have a biennial credentialing maintenance review fee. Your credentialing maintenance hours are due every 2 years because they're trying to get the whole system aligned to update every 2 years. So there's a LEED 2009 system. There will be a LEED 2011 system. And your credentialing hours have to be done in that 2-year window as well. So the idea is that everything's going to be on a 2-year update schedule, your hours, the rating systems themselves, and so on and so forth. So that's where we're going with all of this. So you're going to have to pay $50 every 2 years from now to eternity, essentially, to maintain your LEED GA or LEED AP with specialty credentials. I'm assuming, but don't know, and I haven't checked into this, that if you earn your LEED GA and earn your LEED AP with specialty, that still remains only $50. I'd be amazed if they charge you $100 because you're still going to have one online account. And by the way, if you're a current or a LEED AP under the old system, when you upgrade to the new system, they waive that fee for the first 2 years, so you potentially don't have to pay till 2011 or 2012 for the first time. Again, a lot of people don't like these fees, and that's completely understandable. I personally question the need versus the cost. It's tough to say. I don't have a look at their books, but it is what it is, and you're going to have to pay it, so you might as well be aware. So we've talked about this background. I'm sure you all are ready to get to what you signed up for, which is essentially, what do you actually need to do? So, hold on. I'm getting a note here. I need a second. I can speak a little louder. I don't think I have a way of turning up the volume internally or on my phone, so I'm going to do what I can. So anyway, moving on, getting into the brunt of it here. The first thing I'm going to do, I give this lesson to every class I've taught every single time. If you learn these three things, you're probably not halfway there, but you're far better off than you were before. First off, it's LEED. It is not leads. Do not ever call it leads. It's one of those instant credibility killers. If you're talking to someone who actually knows what lead is and all that, somehow early on it got called leads by a lot of people, and I've seen that go away. I haven't seen it very often, but just understand that it's the leadership in environmental and uh, energy and environmental design, not leadership in environmental and energy designs. Um, so it's LEED, not leads. People are accredited and buildings are certified. A lot of people call, is this building accredited? That's a much smaller issue, but it's something I always drill into our employees to just get the distinction right. Think LEED accredited professional and building certification. So I just always want to point that out in every session I do. And one thing I noticed, I mentioned I hadn't seen it come up a lot, but Frank Geary apparently made this mistake just a couple weeks ago. So if you get those three things right, you're already ahead of Frank Geary when it comes to LEED. He's not a big fan of LEED. I understand why people are against it and for it. I think the reality of the marketplace is it's going to continue for the foreseeable future. But the least you can do is speak about it correctly, even if you're coming out against it. That's one thing I would say. Moving into it. When you're getting ready to the LEED Green Associate exam, the first thing I want you to do is download, it's completely free, it's on the GBCI website, the LEED Green Associate Candidate Handbook. They update this monthly, essentially. It hasn't been every month, but pretty much every month or every 2 months they've been updating it as new information comes out. This contains all of that logistical info. How do I sign up for a test? Where are the test centers located? When do I do what? When do I need to pay this? When do I need to pay that? Definitely go through this. Skim through it at first. You don't need to read it cover to cover. I think it's 50 or 60 pages. But you definitely want to check it out first and check out the current version. As of right now, testing is all done through Thompson Prometric testing centers. There's one in every major city, and I'd be amazed if there wasn't one within 25 miles of anywhere in America, unless you're really in the boondocks. But there's kind of this joint thing where you apply to the GBCI, and then you got to get this authorization code, and then you send that to Thompson Prometric. It's a little bit of a complex process, but it's not that bad, and all that information is contained here. So definitely get this book and check it out. The other thing this book has, it contains current links to all the primary and ancillary references. We'll talk about that in a second, but essentially all of the test material, all the test questions are developed from these primary and ancillary references. All of those references are free with the exception of one book that we'll discuss later. But there are web links. You can access them directly from the PDF to that. And web links break all the time, and that's one of the reasons they update this monthly, is to make sure that all those links are live and good. So check it out. If you downloaded this a year ago and you see everything's not working, go get the new version. And it also goes through, what are the test requirements, the kind of basics. I'm going to cover a lot of what's in this guide here, but I still recommend checking it out. So the test itself is 100 multiple choice questions. They can be, that sounds easier than it is, as anyone who's taken the test will tell you. They can be, here's 5 answers, pick 1. They can be, here's 5 answers, pick 3. And those get pretty difficult pretty quick. You have 2 hours of test time to take it, plus 10 minutes on either side for both a tutorial and the front end, and a survey and the back end. So really you only have 1 minute, 12 seconds per question. That's a pretty fast pace. You are not penalized for answering wrong versus not answering, so you want to answer every question. There are means within the test of marking questions to come back, so I always recommend, go through them quickly, put your first answer down for all of them, flag the ones you want to come back to, and if you have time at the end, take care of it then. I've definitely heard of people who, got through and they're through with like 80 questions and they have 5 minutes left. So definitely, tried it the first time through, go through that quick answer. The question I get all the time is, how do I, what's the passing score? If I'm taking this practice test, if I get 80 questions right, is that good? If I get 90 questions right, is that good? Well, the shorter answer is you don't really know. The way these are done, when they take the beta tests, and the beta tests are, they have 100 or however many people take a test. They grade everything on a bell curve and determine a cutoff score. And they determine relative difficulty. They give people different tests. So they determine relative difficulty of tests as well and specific questions. So everything is weighted. So every test you get, is probably going to be a little bit different from someone else's, and so there's no really way to say, 70 questions is correct. Um, and the way it's been in the past, and I checked into this in detail yesterday, the way it's been in the past is there's this weighted score of anywhere from like 150 to 200, and the cutoff was 170. I looked through the candidate handbook for the LEED GA exam, and they didn't even say that. They said, basically this quote here, that's analyzed by psychometricians to gain statistics and item performance. The final cut score recommendation was then determined by a group of test development experts and subject matter experts. The bottom line is we don't really know what it's going to be. The good news is when you take the test, you get that result instantly. So it's either going to work great or it's not. Or you either pass or fail, and you don't have any delay between the time you take the test and when you find out. And the second you walk out of there, you're either a LEED Green Associate or not. So there's no, it's going to take a little while for you to get your certificate and get loaded on the GBCI website and all that stuff, but you could put it on your business card that day if you wanted. What I normally tell the people in my class, we have a couple practice tests, some we purchased, some we found online. I take a look at them, and I just kind of take them. We found, I work in an architecture firm that's pretty knowledgeable. We work on a lot of sustainable projects. They know architecture and design already. So I gave everyone a practice test before I even started a training class. And what we found was people were pretty much getting, on average, 75% of the questions right. So if you have someone that's kind of knowledgeable about architecture and design in general, or engineering or construction, they're probably going to do pretty well without studying at all ahead of time. What I found, though, was where people were really struggling is they didn't know a lot about the LEED system and how it worked. They didn't know a lot about the GBCI and USGBC, and so that's going to inform what I tell you to study later, and we'll come back to that. But I've been telling people if they're scoring above 85% on their test, they're probably pretty good to go. And I haven't had anyone come back and say, oh, I scored a 90% and we failed. So it sounds like that's relatively good advice. Honestly, you could probably do worse and still take the test and pass. But I'm being conservative on that because I don't want people to waste their money. So 80-85% on a decent test, and we'll talk about some of those study guide availabilities and practice test availabilities in a little bit. I think you're probably pretty ready to take the test. So where do the test questions come from? The next two slides I pulled directly from the LEED GA candidate handbook. They go in there, they have outlines for everything that's going to be on the test. Synergistic opportunities and the LEED application process is a big part of it. So, I'm not going to read all these out, but, cost, project requirements, minimum program requirements, components of LEED Online and how to register a project, the general structure of LEED, the categories and things of that nature. Multiple certifications, how do those work in general? What's the difference between a prerequisite and a voluntary credit? Do you have to have all the prerequisites or not? That sort of thing, and USGBC policies and stuff like that. And then you get into, so there's kind of the LEED, USGBC, and GBCI kind of policy issues, so to speak, and then the other half is kind of the project stuff, general introduction to sustainable design. So, how do I, completely irrespective of LEED, what are general issues that are involved when we're talking about energy use in buildings? Not necessarily specifically related to LEED. That stuff comes in the LEED AP with specialty exams, but just a broad understanding of energy concerns. What are some of the best ways to reduce energy? We'll get into some practice questions in a little bit so you can see what I mean. But to me, that's the other half. So, working with people who are already familiar with the design and construction, I spend about half my time drilling them on LEED rating system policies and procedures, along with the distinctions between the USGBC and the Green Building Certification Institute and those sorts of issues. And the other half, just kind of a refresher on, what they need to do as far as general sustainable design strategies. Now, I mentioned the primary and ancillary references earlier in passing. These are actually what they'll say they pull the test questions from. So this is, the past two slides were an overview of the types of content, and then these are the sources of those test questions as well. They have some kind of weird language on this. Basically, it says, all of the test questions are going to be pulled from these primary references, and then they say, well, they'll sort of also be pulled from the ancillary references. I structured my classes focusing heavily on the primary references. You'll see I have a schedule and reading assignments that are based on those primary references that we'll go over. And Tristan and I will work out a way to make sure all this is available on the LEED user website so you can get access to all this stuff, directly. You don't have to furiously jot this stuff down right now. But you'll see here, and they're pretty broad in what they're pulling from. So for instance, the entire LEED for Homes rating system is listed, and which is scary to a lot of people because they're thinking, well, do I need to know the ins and out of everything in LEED for Homes? And that's not the case. I've chosen to focus my time on those kind of introductory sections and a general understanding of how the LEED Homes rating system works, because it's pretty different than the LEED for existing buildings or LEED for new construction or other systems in the delivery process. So I made sure they understood, you need to have a LEED for Homes provider and what their role is and those sorts of things. And you'll see when we get into the schedule a little bit more about that. The ancillary references are really all over the place. They cited, for instance, the entire Bureau of Labor Statistics website. That is so broad and general. I have essentially excluded it completely from my training because I don't see how you could create any sort of meaningful study regimen based on the entire Bureau of Labor Statistics website. Ditto for the International Code Council website. I mean, what are you possibly supposed to do with that? It just doesn't make any sense to me. So again, I looked at these primary references. I looked at some study guides, and we'll review some study guides in a minute. I do recommend some form of study guide, as we'll see in a second. There are free ones. There are ones for pay. There are very expensive webinars and in-person classes, and we're going to cover that in a moment. So just a breakdown of what I created a 4-week course, and I looked at this, I looked at the kind of the degree of content, and understand this is a course for people that kind of already know about design and construction in general. If you're in the marketing field or a lawyer or maybe a realtor or someone who isn't already kind of involved with the day-to-day, here's how an architecture project is run, how do we, what do engineers normally do, what do architects normally do, what do contractors normally do, you would probably want to consider maybe another week or two just really focusing on what I have covered in week 3 and week 4. And there's a study guide that does a really good job of being a little more broad in their scope, and we'll talk about that in a second. The PPI study guide does a pretty good job of that. So if you're in that situation, I would recommend getting a study guide that's relatively broad. And again, we'll talk about that in a second. So essentially, my 4-week class was broken down where 2 weeks were spent on LEED, USGBC, and GBCI. Okay, so how does the LEED rating system work? And some background information about green buildings in general. And what I mean by that is, the general picture for life cycle savings, that general concept that, yeah, you might pay a little premium up front for a more efficient HVAC and building envelope and design and stuff like that, but you're going to get that back through savings in potentially taxes or utility bills and things of that nature. So the first 2 weeks really cover that. I would definitely go into the USGBC and GBCI organizations themselves. I've seen practice questions from the USGBC itself talking about the differences, whereas the USGBC basically sets the policy, creates the LEED rating system requirements and things of that nature. It's the GBCI's job to do the verification. So they're the ones actually reviewing projects for certification and reviewing and handling the testing for LEED accreditation that y'all are pursuing right now and all that stuff. So there's that split that was there for accreditation standards on a larger scale for ANSI because they want to meet ANSI guidelines. So understanding those kind of nuances and what the USGBC mission is versus the GBCI's mission, who handles what, for instance, who's going to create education programs about this stuff, well, that's the USGBC's responsibility, but who's doing the testing, that's the GBCI. So, you need to understand those things. You need to understand how the USGBC's it's a membership organization, their membership structure, how that differs between chapters and stuff like that. Because if you're going to be representing that you are knowledgeable about LEED, obviously you need to be knowledgeable about the organizations behind LEED. And I think that's where that idea is coming from. So, I spent a week kind of on those things, the different, kind of what I'm covering on the first half of this presentation about the different LEED AP tiers, understanding the LEED AP's role in the process. All that stuff needs to come in. I spent week 2 mostly focused on the LEED rating systems themselves. How do I know when I need to use LEED NC versus LEED core and shell? How do I know when LEED homes is appropriate versus a large-scale condo tower that would be more appropriate under LEED for new construction. So, distinguishing between those LEED rating systems and when to choose the correct one, that is definitely on this test. You need to know that sort of thing. You also need to know just in general, what's the difference between a prerequisite and a regular credit? What's the difference? What is a credit interpretation request? How does that work? What do I need to pay the USGBC to get certified, or the GBCI? How does the registration fee work? How does the actual process of moving through LEED work? What's the difference between a design and construction review? All those things that are that information on how LEED works is important, and a general understanding of the categories, because the categories are fairly well harmonized through all systems. So you will need to know sustainable sites, energy and atmosphere, materials and resources, but you don't necessarily need to know, and where this is distinct from the LEED AP specialty exams, is you don't need to know, for instance, that the nuances of the individual credits. You don't need to spend all that time memorizing credit requirements. At what percentage do I get a point for material for recycled content under MR Credit 4? You don't need to know that for this exam, because that's what the LEED AP specialty exam covers. I've seen a number of questions down here that were asking about, do I need to know the ASHRAE standards? This is a little, it's an interesting debate there, because the intent of the test is no, you don't need to know every little standard, but I have seen questions provided by the GBCI that you need to recognize the really major ones. So for instance, like the ASHRAE 90.1 standard, you need to know that deals with energy modeling. You don't need to know the thresholds at which point you earn points for EA Credit 1, the Optimized Energy Performance Credit. So they've been a little wishy-washy on how much of that detail you need to know specific to LEED and how much you don't, and I'm sorry I don't have a better answer there. So the short answer is, if you want to be really safe about it, I would probably do, I would go through the credits, and maybe there are sites you can see some of the reference standards, and I would maybe just kind of overview those. There might only be one or two questions on that. I wouldn't spend a lot of time worrying about that direct memorization. I'd more worry about the broader issues and the broader understanding of how sustainable design works. So we covered the kind of first half. Second half of the session, like I said, I basically organized my classes straight up following the LEED credit categories. So week 3 covered sustainable site selection, water efficiency, and energy and atmosphere. Week 4 covered indoor environmental quality, materials and resources, and innovation and design. And so, what I mean by that is, I didn't go through every single sustainable site credit. I just talked more broadly about, okay, if we have a site, what are the components? What are the design interventions we can do to make a site sustainable? Development density, access to local resources, not contributing to heat island effect. I didn't focus on the credit-specific language like you would see in LEED CI or LEED NC or anything like that. I just focused on the broader concepts of how those things interact and work. So again, you need to know a broad understanding of what goes into a LEED project, but you don't need to know that specific level LEED data. Again, I created a kind of reading list. These are all based from the primary references, and this is actually on my website on reallifeleed.com. This whole presentation was developed off of a post I've done on LEED GA exam advice, and you can find that by going to my website and just typing in LEED GA advice. And so you can pull all that up there, and I'm sure we'll probably duplicate it on the LEED user site again, so I'm not going to go into more detail there. And so just real quick, going over a couple practice questions, for instance, these were pulled directly from the GBCI candidate handbook for the LEED GA exam, and I believe I might have taken one question from a official USGBC study guide. I think the last one was done for that because they didn't have a good example of kind of that LEED specific question. So, this is very typical. Why should a green project be located in an existing community? Adequate parking is available on site. That's not necessarily true. Zoning approval for the project is easier. That's not necessarily true. Native plantings can be used for erosion control. That can be done anywhere. The connection to basic community resources is present. That's what they're looking for, because if you're in an existing community, you're not having to develop new stores and stuff like that. They're already there. You can potentially walk there. So that's the answer they're looking for, is D. Gray water is most often used for drinking, irrigation, dishwashers, and swimming pools. The answer here is irrigation, because it's simple and it's cheap. So, when we talk about these things in my class, I talk about, what are the most cost-effective methods and that sort of thing. You're expected to know that kind of level of detail. What you're not supposed to know is how is gray water figured into your calculation for WE Credit 1 water efficient landscaping. Okay, so you need to understand the concepts behind those credits, but you don't need to understand necessarily the LEED specific application of it. What you do need to know is the broader components of LEED certification. So for instance, LEED credit weightings are based on relative costs and benefits of the credits, environmental impacts and human benefits, carbon footprint and embodied energy, and expected environmental performance. The answer here is B. The new LEED 2009 system used a credit weighting system to determine the point values for every credit. It's based on this Tracy tool. That's the sort of thing you need to understand at the LEED GA level. How is holistically how are credit ratings determined, and not necessarily the point value for each credit. So going over the study materials themselves, I have had a chance to review 4 separate study materials, one officially from the USGBC, and then a couple third-party ones, and even a free one that a guy put together because he was frustrated that there were no free resources. I'm going to cover that last. I think each of these are good in their own way, and I think each is bad in their own way. And then, of course, the cost considerations come into play as well. The first 2 things I always review together are the USGBC Study Guide and Core Concepts Guide. These are actually 2 books. They're much thinner than those images make it appear at the top of the screen. The thing I'll say, and what's good about them is they're very concise. When I designed my LEED training class, I relied heavily on the LEED Green Associate Study Guide because the chapter headings were so well defined, very easy to go through, good narrative style, and it made it so for my purposes, I could easily see from the official USGBC source, what kind of test content questions, what style of questions are they looking for, what style of content did they think is important, and then I kind of added my own things, shortened some areas, lengthened some areas as I felt appropriate. They're concise, they're well drafted, they have great images, and they are official they're the only things you can find from the USGBC or GBCI. They're more expensive. These 2, I think the LEED Core Concepts Guide is $30 or $40, and the Green Associate Guide is somewhere like $70 or $80. The range in cost is based on whether or not you're a USGBC member or not. I really like these study guides. If you're going to be teaching a class to your firm, this is a good thing to have just because it really is a good format for going through a class. I really did just kind of stole those headings and develop the content within it and develop suggested reading based on that. So I thought that was good for that. If you're taking the test, the thing is it's kind of light on the content. I feel like the questions they would ask at the end, they have example questions in there. There's 60 example questions included in the study guide. The questions they would ask, and again, the answers could not be found in the study guide itself. So I was really frustrated by that. I thought it could have been more detailed. They could have added more information. So again, it's a great organization tool for teachers, not the best study guide for individuals that are trying to find kind of a one-stop shop. Moving on to that, Green Exam Academy, formerly inthelead.com was the former website name. He's created a Green Associate exam walkthrough. It's a PDF file, and there's also a companion audio series that runs about an hour. There's no study questions included. And one thing I forgot to mention about the USGBC Study Guide and the Core Concepts Guide, the Green Building Basics thing is one of the primary references. It's the only one you have to pay for. I was really annoyed to find the Green Building Basics Guide and the Green Associate Study Guide were almost identical in content. They should have made it one guide. I think it's kind of ridiculous that it was made 2 guides personally, and I'm not very happy about that because we bought both, and it was really pointless. If I was you, I would just get the Green Associate Study Guide if I was choosing one and not get the Green Building Basics Guide. That's the first recommendation there. Moving on to the Green Associate Exam walkthrough, very concise. He does a very good bullet point format, hitting all of the kind of key elements in each category. Great, the audio files are great. They're professionally done. They're about an hour to kind of cover from soup to nuts the whole thing, going through very, very quickly. If you're already in the design and construction industry, already have an understanding of LEED or have worked tangentially with LEED a little bit, or at least kind of recognize the kind of differences, this is definitely the study guide for you. It's concise. They have a blank outline thing so you can go along with the guide and kind of fill in the blank guide. That thing is great. Not a lot of there's no study questions. And so you are probably going to want to find some resource there outside of that if you get this. But I was pretty impressed with this. The LEED GA Power Pack, this is from PPI, the next thing down. This is a great one if you aren't coming from an architecture or design background or engineering or construction background, don't have any experience whatsoever with LEED. They go into, for instance, whereas Green Associate Exam walkthrough might say something like, glazing is a good life cycle savings if you're using dimming ballast or something like that. I'm pulling that out of the top of my head. That's all they're going to say. It's going to be one or two sentences. The LEED GA Power Pack, their LEED prep book, is going to go in and explain to you what glazing is. And it's going to explain to you kind of what different types of glazing are. It's very detailed. It's not very concise. So it's thicker. There's more to read. But if you're not going to kind of recognize these key terms, if you're not already familiar with that, definitely this is probably the way you want to go. I was really impressed with that as well. But if you don't want to spend any money, there's a pretty good study guide already out there. This guy, Larry Sims, he was just kind of frustrated and decided to create his own LEED Green Associate study guide. He'd been distributing it on ARE Forum, which is just this online forum for those studying for the ARE exam, but it's also, they created a LEED section. It's become, although LEED user is definitely challenging it now, it had been, kind of the source up until recently for LEED GA kind of study questions and advice and stuff like that. He put this together. It's like 100 pages long. Some of them are articles he's collected, but he does go through step by step and covered each topic in some detail. It's kind of a mix between, I would say, the PPI guide and the Green Exam Academy guide. It's completely free. Right now, you can either go and email him on the ARE forum, or you can find it on realLifeLead.com in my Green Exam GA exam post. I really like it. There's also a free test, but the test I've been less than impressed with, and I will say the Green GA Power Pack has practice tests that you can get that are pretty good. A book, you can order it. There's 2 tests available there that I was pretty impressed with. I have them sitting on my desk, and I've used those in our classes here. Do not get those flashcards. Those flashcards stink, and I go into that further on my website review. They're a waste of money. But the LEED GA study guide from Studio 4, it's a pretty good study guide. Less impressed with the test. Some of the questions are pretty vague. It's surprisingly hard to write a good test. That's something I've learned trying to develop those in-house. The study guide rambles a little bit in certain sections, but for most of the part, it's pretty good. And so if you want to go free, or if you're trying to get this out to a large firm, I would definitely go this route. But depending on who you are, you might find a better fit. It might be worth your time to spend a little bit of money on some of those other study guides I mentioned. There are other options out there, webinars, online classes, stuff like that. The online webinar series are normally multi-week sort of things, self-paced kind of deals. Those range anywhere from $100 to $300. In-person classes, generally you'll see for like $295 or $395 for a full-day session or maybe a 4-week course. I've seen them as high as $700. I haven't ever taken those. And one thing I'll say is always check your local USGBC chapter. Because I know I'm in South Carolina and with USGBC Low Country, we're doing a half-day workshop as part of our Sustain SC conference, our annual conference. I think we're charging like $60 for SC chapter members for what would normally cost $200 to $400. The way we do that is I volunteer. I'm not going to charge any money for that sort of thing, so they can do it super cheap. We've got the venue already. Most chapters are starting, if not already, have some sort of LEED GA training or LEED AP training. So I would definitely investigate that. They're normally pretty well subsidized if you're a chapter member. So find out who your local USGBC chapter or branch is, and I would at least give them an email to see what's going on there, because those are normally pretty either subsidized by the branch or they have volunteers doing it. Normally, the ones we've had I felt have been quite high quality, so I would check that out before necessarily dropping $500 on an online webinar. So that's that, and I took a little longer than I expected, but I think we still have about 10 minutes for questions. So I'll let Tristan take over, and we'll go from there.
Okay, thanks a lot, Joel. Great presentation, and there are a number of questions I've got queued up for you. I just want to pause here and note that this webinar is being recorded and will be posted on our site, leaduser.com. And since you signed up for this webinar, you will receive an email with a link to that recording. Also, in a moment, we're going to put a couple little quick polls on the screen so you can tell us a little bit about how you found out about this webinar and how useful it was for you. And you can also keep your questions coming through the Q&A window. So now, first question for you, Joel. The study guides you reviewed were PDF-based or hard copies. Are there any online exam prep resources that you recommended that you've taken a look at?
Basically what happened is for about a year or so, I put out a kind of standing call. If you have reference materials or are doing this, I'll review it. Just send me a thing and we'll go from there. These are the 4 that I got access to, for lack of a better term. There are online things out there. I have not, when I took my exam 4 years ago, I did the official USGBC webinar. It's like Essentials of LEED Accreditation. I went and checked yesterday, and they have it listed, but they don't have it live online. So the USGBC, to my knowledge right now, does not have a study guide or study webinar series that is live. I could be wrong on that, but I checked yesterday and wasn't able to find one. There are other ones. I believe PPI has a big one. There's like Planet something, Planet Green or something like that has one. The honest answer is I haven't reviewed those, so it's kind of a crapshoot, and that's my answer right now. Since the post has gone up, though, I have gotten response from a couple people. Like there's someone, and I'm not going to say who it is, but I'm just waiting to get their study guide forwarded to me. And like I said, if anyone if you're taking one of these sessions, please let them know. I'll review it for them and add their stuff to the review. So that would be the short answer.
Okay, thanks, Joel. A couple people had more questions about the course that you delivered in-house for you members of your firm. How many days a week did you meet? How long was each session? Any more detail you can give on that?
We did 4 weeks with meeting once a week, with about an hour-and-a-half session each time. And what I did each week was I went into greater detail than I posted here. Like I said, I lectured in those classes. I gave them required reading each week that involved all the stuff that you saw listed on that primary references recommended reading. And then since we had some in-house study guides, I also aligned that and added some study guide suggested reading as well. And then I gave them homework questions each week, which were just practice questions relating to the exam content we covered. So, my time as teaching was involved roughly, an hour, hour and a half a week. I think to do it right, if you want to do it in 4 weeks, I think you could probably get this done in, say, 16 hours, kind of soup to nuts. 4 hours a week or so, because there's a fair amount of reading I've assigned, and there's a lot of material to cover. And the thing is, a lot of that material is going to be duplicative, so, stuff you're reading in one primary reference, you're going to see again, like, stuff you see in the introductory sections of the USGBC reference guides, you're going to see again in the Davis-Langdon cost of LEED report and stuff like that. So, I think a reasonable study schedule would be, 3 or 4 hours a week for 4 weeks. I think you're probably going to be in pretty good shape to take the exam there.
Okay, thanks, Joel. Now, I don't know if you happen to know an answer to this, but a couple people on the webinar are asking about Canadian requirements and how the
I'm
credentials
sorry, I
differ
am not
there.
familiar with. I am not familiar with the Canadian requirements.
I would recommend that people follow up with a Canada GBC for specific
Yeah, and I
information
would
on
be
that.
surprised. I would say the same thing, and I would check to see if they have a separate candidate handbook for USGBC Canada or Canada GBC.
Yeah, and my understanding is that if there are differences, they're not going to be that significant because the LEED system itself is not very different
Yeah.
in Canada.
Yeah, I would be surprised if it was terribly different. Yeah. I agree with
that. Now, Joel, you did mention this during your presentation, but we had a couple questions about LEED for Homes and wondered if you could talk about that just a little bit. How much LEED for Homes stuff do you need to know to pass the LEED GA or the LEED AP exam for that matter?
The first thing I would be aware of is when is LEED for Homes appropriate, because not every residential project is going to be LEED for Homes. Your high-rise projects are going to still be LEED NC, and I think the cutoff there is 3 or 4 stories, I believe. I think if it's 4-story, well, now they have a LEED for Homes mid-rise pilot. I don't believe that's in the test yet, but again, I'm not 100% certain on that. Um, so I would look at the requirements of, how to choose which scenario. The other thing I would want to know about is the LEED for Homes delivery process. It's not the same as the LEED NC process. I'm going through this for the first time with some affordable housing projects we're doing at LS3P. You have to get a LEED for Homes provider. There's a in-the-field verification system with some energy raters and stuff like that. And so I would want to know about all that. Now, again, you're not going to need to know every credit in LEED for Homes. I would argue it's probably enough to just know to be able to recognize the categories in LEED for Homes. So if you might get a question, which of these categories are not in the LEED for Homes rating system or something like that. I'd be surprised if that was a question, but that's the sort of detail you would need to know, in my opinion, which, of course, is not an official opinion. But again, I haven't had anyone come back to me and say, oh, God, we missed all these LEED for Homes questions because we didn't know that. So yeah, I would say definitely check. Know when to use it, know the general structure and the process and payments and stuff like that, but don't worry about credit specifics.
Yeah, I would agree with that and say, there is USGBC has a rating system selection policy PDF that is pretty short. It's probably good reading for anyone who wants to be familiar with LEED. And similarly, there's a LEED minimum program requirements document that is also good reading. I don't think you'd be quizzed on the details in the LEED J exam, but it's that kind of background thing.
Yeah, you need to understand, for instance, how the minimum project requirements affect, whether a system applies or not. So that regulates whether or not a system or a given project will qualify for LEED. It has to meet those requirements. So you need to know that. You need to know how minimum project requirements work. There's like 7 or 8, I think. I don't think you need to memorize every minimum program requirement, but I would be able to recognize them if they came up in a question and say, oh, that's a minimum program requirement issue or not.
Joel, I've got a question here that's actually more of a comment from someone who seems to be pretty knowledgeable. She says the LEED GA candidate handbook is only 29 pages total, not 60 plus, as you mentioned. And this person says it's critical to read every page within the document, especially note the specific instructions regarding the exam, registration, and identification details. Many people sign up for their exam using their common name, like Jimmy, instead of James. But when you show up for the exam, you must present your photo identification, which usually contains your legal name. If these names do not match, you will be not able to take the exam that day. So I thought that was just a useful tip. Any further comments?
Yeah, definitely, I agree. And what I meant by skimming it is you definitely need to know all that logistical information is very important. I think sometimes some of those topic areas can be a little confusing because there's so many of them, and that's what I was saying. I think a good study guide can kind of help you avoid spending too much time on something that might be inappropriate. And that's all I really meant by that. But yeah, you definitely, and that's why I said the first thing you need to do is check out that LEED GA handbook. Or the candidate handbook. That's definitely something you want to do.
And we had a similar question about what does a LEED GA person need to know about LEED for neighborhood developments, the rating system?
Again, you're going to want to know when is that the appropriate system to use. I would expect a fair amount of questions, although I don't know how many, at least a couple questions on, they're going to give you a project scope. So they're going to say, an owner comes to you with a 40-acre plot of land and they want to build, some restaurants and residential component and all this. Which system is the most appropriate? And they might say LEED AP for multiple buildings, although that's a bad example. Excuse me, LEED NC, LEED CS, or LEED ND, and you will need to recognize that LEED ND is probably the best system for that. And they might even say, which could this project be certified under? Pick all that apply or pick multiple, because some of those buildings could be certified LEED NC, and some of them could be, and the whole project itself could be LEED ND. So you could have a multiple certification scenario. You see that a lot. Basically, any building could be LEED NC or LEED CS or LEED CI, and then become LEED for existing building. Not every building, because you got to have the full building, but there's a lot of times when multiple rating systems are appropriate. So really drill down on distinguishing the most appropriate system. That's something you need to know. And again, beyond that, the LEED ND process is different, and because they're just launching it now, I do have some questions on exactly how much that's going to be included. So that's something I really need to go more into. The press release that they're launching it this Thursday just came out last week. So there's some transition there with the new system, and I'd have to get back to you on exactly what you need to know for that.
Okay, thank you, Joel. That's all the time we have for questions, although in a moment I'm going to ask you to give your final, most important tip, which I didn't warn you about, so I hope you can think of something. Right now, though, I'm going to, again, just say thank you, and I'm going to send you all to your browsers to leaduser.com so you can get familiar with this resource, which is a great way to learn more about LEED, and there's a free forum you can use to ask questions or share your experience on any LEED credit out there. This free webinar has been sponsored by LeadUser, and as I said, it's a free, it's a website that gives credit-by-credit advice on earning LEED certification, and memberships are available at a variety of rates starting at $9.95 per month. This webinar has been presented by Joel McKellar, and I want to thank you, Joel. My name is Tristan Roberts. I've been the moderator. And Joel, what is your most golden tip for studying for and passing the LEED GA exam, and anything else you want to add to close things out?
One thing that I would recommend that I did that I thought was very helpful in setting up my class for our students is find a practice test. If you can, and I would just take that free practice test. Don't spend any money yet. The practice test from the Studio 4 that you can find on my website, download that, take it, see what you score on. If you get 75% good, if you get 50% fine, you're going to see what you don't know, and then study those things, because there's going to be a lot. Most people, you're already going to know a lot of the information you need to know. It's just making sure you close that gap between what you don't know and what you need to know. So I think it worked really well. Take the test first. See what you're missing, and then make sure you're spending extra emphasis on those areas. And that would probably be my number one recommendation.
Thanks, Joel. That's great. And this concludes our webinar today. Thank you all for joining, and I hope we'll see you in the future on future webinars and on leaduser.com. If you had questions that didn't get answered, please just understand we have recorded this webinar, and we'll be posting it on leaduser.com, where there will be a forum that you can use to ask any further questions and also share your experience. And thank you to the many people today who posted thoughts and helpful tips that they had learned as well. Thank you again, and have a great day.